Amy Adams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to take a call in this afternoon's appropriations and press supply estimates debate. And it certainly has been an interesting debate to listen to this afternoon. Wide-ranging, doesn't really begin to cover some of the scope of what we've heard. But as a relatively new member in the House, I must say it took me a little bit of time to get my head around some of these financial processes that we go through year on year in this House, and it's just worth, I think, clarifying for anyone listening at home who isn't familiar with that process that this part of the financial program is just about signing off formally on spending that's already occurred over the 2009-10 year that's happened under the Impress supply bills, and we now come back and formally sign off on it because it was outside the votes in last year's budget. And so on our Finance and Expenditure Committee, we had the opportunity to have a look at the supplementary estimates in a little bit more detail, and that was certainly a very interesting experience and certainly a help in getting our heads around how that worked. And the major increases this year in the estimates were primarily in the finance portfolio of about $1.8 billion, revenue about $900 million, social development $475 million. Those are sort of the big three. But I think the interesting thing, when you look at the category of that expenditure and you look at where it's occurred, is that the big ticket items, sir, are really all related to the global financial crisis and the uncertainty that brought about. And when we go through the briefings and we break down some of those large numbers, we see that the big ticket items were things like the Guarantee and Indemnity Scheme that was a reaction to that serious global financial situation we found ourselves in. They were costs of things like massive increases in debt servicing costs. They were things like the unexpected jumps in debt impairments and debt write-offs, both in the tax arena and the social policy area. And of course, not surprisingly, there was a large cost for increased benefits as we saw New Zealanders dealing with the fallout of that recession. So I think it is entirely appropriate in this debate, sir, albeit that it's a wide-ranging one, that when we're talking about the need to now sign off on that additional expenditure, we do take a moment to look at our economy, where it's come from and where it's going, because it has been that incredible, changing, fast-paced, changing environment that we've found ourselves in, certainly since the National-led government has been in office, because that's really been the largest contributing factor to the numbers we're now looking at today. So I want to start really looking at exactly that, where our economy was, what was sort of the health check. Given that we've just had Men's Health Month, or we're just having Men's Health Month, let's have an economy health snapshot of where we're at. And actually the economy in 2008, even before we went into the global financial crisis, was in a really perilous state. And it was in a perilous state because of exactly the same sort of imbalances that now this whole House is acknowledging exist. But let's not kid ourselves that these are imbalances that came about under the recession. The sort of imbalances that this country and its economy are really struggling to grapple with, sir, are imbalances that have existed long before any international crisis. And the biggest one of those has been the failure of our productive sector to grow and expand as it should have since the turn of the millennium. Since 2000, sir, we've had a productive sector that's been in decline. And that's something that I've mentioned in this House on more than one occasion. And, sir, it's something I'm going to keep mentioning and continue to go on about, because if we don't address that, if we don't acknowledge in this House that we have to get our productive sector in a healthy position, then we will never create the sort of economy that we need. Now, it's been said here before, and I think it was Mr Douglas who said it, but it's very easy to say these things. It's very easy, I apologise, it was the Minister, Mr Dunn. It's very easy to stand up and pay lip service to wanting to build exports and to grow innovation and to support business. And I don't think there's many parties in this House who'd be brave enough to actually stand up and say that they don't agree with any of that. But the difference, sir, is what actions this House is prepared to take to make that happen. They're cheap words, they're easy words. If you're not prepared to actually break the eggs to make the omelette, then you shouldn't be making those sorts of claims. So the economy we picked up in 2008 was one where the productive sector had been neglected, it had been abused, it had been abandoned by its government, and we were seeing the consequence of that. We were seeing a steady decline in exports. We were seeing exporters struggling to stay afloat. We were seeing more and more bad New Zealand businesses shutting down, not taking on staff, not making a profit and increasingly heading overseas to what they perceived as greener pastures. And there is no way, sir, we are going to ever get our economy to a place where it can provide sustainable jobs, good incomes and the standard of life to which we all aspire unless we're prepared to be honest with ourselves and say, if we don't create an environment in which business can grow and can thrive and can prosper, then, sir, last one out, turn out the lights, because this economy is doomed if we can't get that right. That's why this government, sir, when it came into office, had two immediate goals. The first one was to deal with the recession as best as we could and make the impact on New Zealanders as little as it could be. We knew we couldn't avoid it. This was happening all across the world, but, sir, what we could do was make sure that we maintained core entitlements to New Zealanders, which we've done. We could make sure that we delivered on our commitments to New Zealanders, which we've done. And, sir, we could make sure that we delivered the sort of platform for economic growth that we promised New Zealand in the 2008 election campaign and the New Zealanders invested in when they voted for this national-led government. And, sir, in the 2009 budget and then in the most recent budget, we are starting to see that program roll out. Now, sir, I often describe this economy as, a pretty slow-moving beast to turn around. In the words of the infamous Rachel Hunter, it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. But you have to start by putting in place those foundations for growth. And, sir, that's things like addressing tax. It's things like carrying out the biggest single reform of our tax system that we've seen for 25 years. And why are we doing that, sir? We're doing it because that is one of the biggest incentives we can give to this economy. It's the biggest way we can say to New Zealanders, work hard, get ahead, save more, invest more, and your government will back you. That's what tax reform is all about. It's not about more money to the government. It's about incentivising this economy to be more productive and less consumption focused. That's how we're going to address the shortfall in personal savings, and that's, sir, how we're going to start to give business in this country the message that you can get ahead, there is a future here, and that's when we'll see our best and our brightest returning home to base themselves in New Zealand. And, sir, can I just make the point? When we talk about business, let's not think of it as some big, ugly corporate on the stock exchange. The vast bulk of business in this country is small enterprises employing 10 or fewer staff. That's what we talk about with business. Don't buy into this line that it's some faceless corporation. Supporting business is supporting the families and the people in our communities who get up every day and work very hard just to pay the bills. And that's what's been lacking. But, sir, with the sort of tax incentives in this budget and the sort of investment in infrastructure that will lay those foundations for growth, we are putting New Zealand on a road to prosperity once more, and we're putting New Zealand into a space, sir, that will see economic growth delivered. In this budget, we're now looking at growth projections of averaging 3% for the next 3 years, and that is fantastic news. It's going to mean 170,000 new jobs. It's going to mean greater incomes for Kiwi families. And, sir, it's the sort of economic growth that's going to provide the outcomes that all New Zealanders want. So when we look at the infrastructure that this country has been calling out for under the 9 years of Labour and that we are now delivering, that's going to see some of those bottlenecks removed. It's going to see the roading put in place. Roading projects like the Christchurch Southern Motorway that my electorate's been calling for 19 years is now underway. I drove past it yesterday. The bulldozers are rolling. It's a fabulous sight to see. We're going to see an investment in broadband. And I can tell you that in my communities in Selwyn, that is the single biggest issue that my constituents raise with me. They can't get broadband, and without broadband you can't do business in a modern environment. So, sir, you can see our investment in infrastructure straight away translating into setting the conditions for economic growth, for prosperity for New Zealand. So that's what this government is all about. That's what we've been delivering since the 8th of November 2008, and that's what we're going to continue to deliver, because we know, sir, that that's what New Zealanders want. They want economic growth, they want safer communities, they want raised education standards, they want less bureaucracy, and they want a government that has aspiration, that has hope for them, that knows that we can aspire to more in this country. We're not tall poppies on this side of the house. We don't knock anyone who puts their head above the parapet. We say, actually, if you're prepared to work hard, we're going to back you. This is a government that will get in behind any New Zealander who wants to get ahead. But, sir, it's not just hollow words from us. We don't stand here and make the speeches. We get out there and do it. Sir, I'm very pleased to support this budget. Or whatever. corporate is I was talking
Thank you, Mr Speaker.